Hello, all our friends and followers of SAMexpert, and those who are new to our channels, welcome as well. We are here today with a Microsoft licensing update for November 2024. And fortunately, this month brought us some pretty good news and interesting news and some confusing news as well, which we can't avoid mentioning today. And without further ado, let's go to the slides. And I'll start with the update for service providers. Very quick one. Service providers now can deploy Windows Server 2025 and System Center 2025. And a very important note for service providers is that nothing has changed for you in regards to the licensing rules. It's all exactly the same. It all remains the same. The only thing that changed is the maximum version you may deploy. Simple. Let's move on. The end client side is a bit more interesting. As you can see, not very eventful, but let's not look at the number of events. We've had months this year when Microsoft would release a long list of updates that were nothing, not interesting, boring, not affecting the majority of the end clients or providers. This month, we finally have new versions of two major Microsoft products, Windows Server 2025 and System Center 2025. In addition, Windows Server got a new pay-as-you-go option with Azure Arc, which is very valuable and very interesting. And we'll discuss it today as well. Windows 10 ESU terms, extended security updates, are now published. It's available. You can buy it if you still run Windows 10 and you want extended security updates. You're concerned about security. You have that option. It's not cheap, and I'll talk about the costs as well a bit later in today's live session. And we have some various updates to Microsoft Fabric, Azure Maps, Azure for IT operations. I'll touch on all of these. They are less important for the majority of the Microsoft customers unless you work with Azure Maps. Unless you need to use Azure IT operations, then for that tiny minority, it may be an important update. But let's move on. And I'll start with the boring stuff first and come to the fun stuff at the end of the live show. Please bear with me. I need to check messages. Questions are popping up. Questions are coming through various channels, even on my phone. People are texting questions. We'll get to all your questions. Those who sent me your questions now, you know who that is. We'll get to them. Microsoft Fabric, very small update. They talk about healthcare data solutions, that access to healthcare data solutions in Fabric requires a subscription to Microsoft Fabric. That's it. If you're interested in this, there you go. We don't use it. Our clients don't use it, so can't comment on this. Azure Maps has quite a few updates. First of all, just clarified and updated terms. Nothing in particular very interesting in these updates. If you use Azure Maps in your applications, then by all means, look at that. AI clause. It's a new one. They added that the customers may not use data from Azure Maps to train their AI models. So don't do that. Don't be naughty. Don't use data from Azure Maps for machine learning and artificial intelligence. It's an important update, I must say. If you do that, stop. There's a new section in regards to how you're allowed to use it in broadcast and television. This section explains how. So if you're on broadcast and television, you use Azure Maps for weather maps, for example, for traffic maps. That's a lot of text. Go to the Azure page and Microsoft product terms, read about it. There's no reason to spend time in this session to discuss that particular update. Moving on. Again, Azure IT operations, a completely new set of rights. They detail who's allowed to access, how many people, other things. Again, not a popular product, so we move on to the more popular products. Just make sure that if you're interested in this, you go to product terms and read that updated section. It's new. It hasn't been there. It hasn't been there before. Windows 10 extended security updates are finally available and mentioned in product terms. And let's stop on them because they're very important for the majority of companies we work with. And these are the items from the product terms. And I highlighted specifically certain things that you need to pay attention to. So first of all, Windows 10 ESU, regardless of how you bought the licenses, you can have Windows 10 licenses per user. These licenses are per device. So extended security update license is required per each device, not just running a Windows 10 with ESU, but also accessing virtual machines that run Windows 10 with ESU. So if you use Windows 10 with ESU anyhow, directly on the device or indirectly via accessing a virtual machine, that device, the client device, requires a ESU license. Please remember that. There's an exception in Azure. As usual, Microsoft left themselves an exception. Anything that's in Azure is usually cheaper than outside of Azure. And one of the points here is that in the product terms, pay attention, in the product terms, they only say that if you access Azure Virtual Desktop, it's a separate service. It's not Windows 365. It's Azure Virtual Desktop. If you access Azure Virtual Desktop, that Azure Virtual Desktop with ESU does not require you to license your devices that you use to access that Azure Virtual Desktop. So effectively, Windows 10 with ESU in AVD doesn't require you to buy, doesn't incur any extra cost for your end client devices. That's the only exception from the rule. Then if you want to use Windows 10 with ESU in test and development, you may, unlimited, but your organization requires at least one ESU subscription. It's a ridiculous rule. At least one ESU subscription. If you have at least one ESU subscription, and it's a subscription, it's an annual cost, then you may use Windows 10 with extended security updates in an unlimited number on your dev and test, in your dev and test environments, on your dev and test devices. And the last point also is, if you've heard about extended security updates before, it should not be a surprise for you. The language is very complicated. Let me try and simplify this. Whenever you want to start using extended security updates, you have to buy licenses starting from the first year. So if you decide that you need those updates and it's year 2027, you will have to pay for the ESU 2025, ESU 2026, and ESU 2027. So you can't start mid-term. You have to pay back to the very beginning of when the ESU was released. So you will have, in any case, you will have to pay for 3 years if you start at the third year. So please pay attention to that. That's what they say. You can't assign a new license to the device without the previous license for ESU. It always requires full term payments. More, not from the product terms, from various sources, blogs. Please be careful with this, because blogs are not product terms. I must emphasize now, and I will repeat it again today, that anything outside of product terms, especially on learn.microsoft.com, is not official. There is a lot of conflicting information on learn.microsoft.com that is not even, that is contradicting the actual licensing rules. Still, I selected a few interesting points here. Let's discuss them. The first one is, what is the price? You already can see it on the slide. It's in the first year, $61 per device per year. That is the price for Windows 10 extended security updates. In the second year, it will be $122. It doubles. In the third year, per device. In the third year, it will be $244 per device per year. And then it will stop. They will stop releasing them. That's it. 3 years. Migrate to Windows 11, migrate to Windows 12. That's what they want you to do. Unless you don't care and you don't need updates, you're just happy to run the old versions. It's up to you, by the way. You're not required to buy extended security updates. It's up to you. If you're concerned about IT security, you probably will. If you are concerned but you have other measures to secure environments, you probably will look at those other measures. This is your decision. So you're not required to buy those updates. It's another important point. They say here, clarifying the terms, that if you decide to jump into the program in year 2, you'll have to pay for year 1 too. I said that. There's one thing where blogs contradict product terms. So in the blog, in the announcement, I think it was on the 29th of October, Microsoft said that those that access Windows 365, those are licensed with Windows 365, so they use Windows 365 virtual machines, they get the ESU at no additional cost. Basically, it's free. That's not in product terms. Product terms doesn't mention Windows 365. I need to check the Windows 365 page, but where they talk about actually Windows ESU, they only mention Azure Virtual Desktops. That's it. Nothing else. Just Azure Virtual Desktops. And there is a discount from 60. There's a discount from $61. One discount is when you use Microsoft Intune or Windows Auto Patch to manage your Windows 10 issues. Then there's a 25% discount. It's going to cost you $45 per device, roughly 25% discount, not exactly 25%. Moving on, so that's all about Windows 10 ESU. Now let's talk about System Center 2025 and Windows Server 2025. Probably the most interesting bits of information here. We will have a training on this channel on LinkedIn, if you're watching this on LinkedIn right now, and on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can stay on the same channel. On the 20th, in exactly 2 weeks, I'm going to present you a very detailed licensing training on these two products. So please bear with us for 2 weeks. There's going to be a 1 hour long, very compressed, compacted training based on our previous training for Windows Server 2022, but for the new versions. Now, let's talk about them quickly before the training. First of all, System Center 2025 licensing remains exactly the same. There are no changes. So if you already know how it's licensed, you don't need to learn anything else. You just can upgrade. If you have upgrade rights, if you buy new licenses, you can deploy version 2025. All the formulas, all the rules, everything remains exactly the same. There are no changes. There are no updates. It's all the same. For those of you who are new and you have no idea how it's licensed, come to the training in 2 weeks on the 20th of November. This channel. Windows Server 2025. Again, licensing remains the same, but not really. So there's one addition for Windows Server 2025, which is very exciting and very confusing at the same time. And let me explain. That's the pay-as-you-go option. Windows Server connected to Azure Arc now have an option of pay-as-you-go licensing. The reason I'm stuttering is because I don't know how to call it properly. It's not really pay-as-you-go licensing. It's just a pay-as-you-go billing. So it doesn't require a license. We'll get to that. It doesn't require a license in a traditional way. Shouldn't, but it's not clear. And you have an option to pay for it per hour, like in Azure. Very much like in Azure. This is new and exciting. If somebody needs temporary elastic workloads, like with SQL Server with Azure Arc, I highly recommend looking at this option, but not yet. And let me explain why not yet. Oh dear. So these are the rules. These are the licensing restrictions. This is how it's formulated in product terms. This big pile of nonsensical text. I split it in different bullet points and spent more than a week meditating on this, trying to make sense of it, because it's right now it doesn't make any sense. If you read it as is, it doesn't make any sense. So let me start point by point, and I'll try and explain and simplify this as much as I can, but not everything. Forewarning, not everything still makes sense. First of all, point number 1, customer must have a valid Windows Server Standard or Windows Server Data Center license to use the pay-as-you-go option it's a pay-as-you-go option. What license? So that is not clear. And nobody, and I spoke to over 10 worldwide famous Microsoft licensing advisors. Everybody just does this. No idea. Nobody can understand what the hell Microsoft was trying to say here. If it's a pay-as-you-go option, why are we talking about a license? And the way it also says that we must have a valid Windows Server standard. It doesn't say it must be assigned to the server in this sentence. Do we just have to have it somewhere, stored in, I don't know, in a drawer, in a cupboard, in the server room, lying on the server somewhere, like a printed out license? What did you try to say here? The second point, for licensed servers, yeah, they mentioned licensed server. Running pay-as-you-go virtual machines, there are no restrictions on the number of pay-as-you-go virtual machines that can be deployed. Why would there be a restriction on the number of pay-as-you-go virtual machines? Because every pay-as-you-go virtual machine requires a separate Azure connection and a separate Azure pay-as-you-go billing line item. So obviously, why would it be limited? If you need to deploy a pay-as-you-go virtual machine, you connect it to Azure Arc, you start getting billed. So why this point? What does it serve? No idea. But at least it's logical. Additional virtualization rights are not granted. Again, try and decipher this. So the current opinion is that it means that if you deploy a Windows Server standard pay-as-you-go virtual machine, then it doesn't let you deploy another pay-as-you-go Windows standard virtual machine on the same machine, as you would have with licenses. So when you assign a Windows Server standard license, a set of licenses, using all the formulas, then it gives you rights to run 2 virtual machines. Again, nonsensical. Why are you saying so? Because it's clear that each virtual machine or physical machine, by the way, requires a separate license. If it was a clarification that doesn't clarify anything, the way it's formulated, Microsoft, pull your act together. For each licensed server that is running a pay-as-you-go virtual machine, customer may run one instance in an operating system environment. That's clear. That's just them saying one connection, one pay-as-you-go connection, one instance. And then they repeat the same in the next sentence, sort of. A separate license is required for each guest. Guest is not defined. What is a guest? Is this a virtual machine? So anyway, let me try and simplify this as much as I can. The last 4 points effectively say each virtual machine consumes a separate subscription. That's it. All of that text could have been compressed into that sentence. Each virtual machine consumes one subscription, requires one subscription, one Azure Arc connection, one Azure Arc line item in the bill. That's it. But the first one is confusing. If we are talking about licenses assigned to the virtual machine, if I assign a Windows Server data center license to a physical machine, to a host, I already get unlimited virtualization. I don't need pay-as-you-go. I don't need additional licenses. If I'm required to assign a data center license, that takes that entire host out of the context of pay-as-you-go, because I can do whatever I want on that host. Seriously, as long as it's licensed with the current edition and I don't go over that current edition. That's it. So, general advice: wait, hold, don't use it. Really, don't use it. And please don't use learn.microsoft.com as your source of information. So Carl on the call, hi Carl, he just wrote, this is to cover the idea you can use Windows Server Standard and have no virtualization limitations. I don't know why they wrote this. They could have written one sentence that would have clarified it all and made it clear. Right now, it's a bloody mess. Excuse my French. So on the learn.microsoft.com, which is not a licensing resource, never use it. I mentioned Carl because yesterday we discussed Azure Stack HCI rules, which are different in product terms and on learn.microsoft.com. And guess what is the right source? Product terms. Whatever's written on learn.microsoft.com doesn't change the licensing rules. It does not override what's written in product terms. But we'll get to that. We probably will release a separate video about that. What they say there, still, it could be interesting because it confuses this even more. They say that your device must be running Windows Server 2025 Standard or Data Center Edition. I get the version. When in the licensing world, when we say device, we don't mean virtual machine. So if we assume that this was written by somebody who understands the meaning of the word device, which is not necessarily, because learn.microsoft.com is a community-supported resource. You could submit changes via GitHub. If they understand what device is, does it mean that we can't use VMware virtualization with the server with Azure Arc? If you read, it's not in product terms. Product terms doesn't put this limitation. But if we trust this, does it? It's not codified. It's not allowed explicitly. It's not forbidden explicitly. So big question: do we have to use Hyper-V? Not in product terms, but maybe they're suggesting we have to use Hyper-V. That's why, again, stay away for now, at least until Microsoft Ignite, at least until they clarify this. And then it requires that your device isn't currently licensed or activated with another license. So here there's a big confusion across people who manage licenses. We get that in questions almost daily, not maybe weekly. I wouldn't say daily. People ask questions, admins ask questions about licensing, where actually they mean activation. Licensing and activation are completely different things. Licensing is a legal act. Activation is a technical act of activating a license on the server. They're different. So don't mix them up. So probably what they try to say here is that it's not activated with another license, not licensed with another license, because otherwise this would contradict product terms that talk about having a license. And again, stay away. Just stay away, don't touch it. And last but not least, it's not yet in the Azure Pricing Calculator. I just had a chat with Microsoft about Azure Pricing Calculator. They said they don't know the ETA when it's going to be there. It will be there, but right now it's not there. And the reason why I wanted to check it in the Azure Pricing Calculator is because other unofficial resources and blog posts and other announcements from Microsoft, they suggested that the price of an Azure Arc pay-as-you-go virtual machine will not be edition dependent. Windows Server Data Center and standard virtual machines, if we trust those announcements, will cost exactly the same, following exactly the logic in Azure. Because in Azure, your licensing costs don't depend on the edition of the Windows Server virtual machine. There is another question why I really want to see the Azure Pricing Calculator. It's an Azure cost. Azure pay-as-you-go, Windows Server pay-as-you-go is an Azure cost. It's an Azure service. It's built through your Azure subscription, so it should be in the calculator. The other reason why I wanted to see it there is in Azure, when you procure pay-as-you-go licenses, when you deploy a virtual machine without using Azure Hybrid Use Benefit, without licenses, with pay-as-you-go, included license, 2 core virtual machines are only billed for 2 cores of license. There's no 8-core minimum. 4-core virtual machines are only built for 4 cores and 6 and whatnot. There are no 6-core machines as far as I remember, but anyway, there are 2-core virtual machines, and it's very obvious when you look at the cost of the Windows Server included license, then they only charge you for 2 cores. Will that be the same through the Azure Arc pay-as-you-go subscription? I hope so. I hope so, because if actually what Microsoft is trying to do is they're trying to kind of creep with Azure everywhere, to your edge computing, to service provider data centers. So there is a difference though still, because Azure Stack HCI Hybrid Use Benefit is not the same as Azure Stack HCI Hybrid Use Benefit in Azure. So maybe there'll be a difference, maybe not. I'm eagerly awaiting until Microsoft decides to finally pulls the act together, clarifies the terms, and puts this in the Azure Pricing Calculator in the APC. So fingers crossed. We'll see. It's an exciting development. It's a good development, but the way it's delivered is meh, to say the least. So let's have a look at the questions in the chat. There aren't that many. Do you have any updates on the changes to Microsoft Azure Hybrid Benefits? There are no changes to Azure Hybrid Use Benefits. I'm not sure, Jitendra, what you mean by that question. So far, it stays the same. the only thing that we expect to maybe change after Ignite is, I hope they will allow Azure Habit Use Benefit through other channels than EA and CSP on Azure Stack HCI. Right now, you can only use enterprise agreement or CSP licenses. You can't use MPSA, you can't use OEM with attached to say. There are lots of other exceptions that you may not think about, but they exist, and they're pretty painful and expensive. So hopefully that will be harmonized. Hopefully, I'm saying hopefully for many partners we talk with, but I have serious doubts it's going to change, because that will undermine revenue for Microsoft. But we'll have a separate video about it. So that's it for today. Very excited about Windows Server 2025. I'm very excited about Windows Server Pay-as-you-go with Azure Arc, but I will only recommend using it personally and as a founder of the company called SAMexpert, when the terms are clarified, when the pricing is transparent, when it's part of the Azure pricing calculator, and we can start strategizing, thinking about how to use it, what's the better option. I can see multiple ways of reducing licensing costs. On the other hand, will Microsoft allow all of those ways to be used? Like, for example, paying for only 2 cores instead of 8? Because that will, again, reduce the licensing revenue. Let's wait and see. Hopefully not that long. Hopefully, at least in the first days of December, there'll be some sort of clarification. And I will repeat my advice is, don't trust secondary sources. If they contradict product terms takes precedence. You will never be able to go to court, for example, and say, I read it on a Microsoft's blog. That doesn't work that way. Product terms is the only official, recognized source of licensing information. And on that, I would say positive note, I'd like to say, everybody, thanks again for attending today's live event. And the recording will be available on this channel. Come again in exactly 2 weeks to our Windows Server licensing training. You can look up the previous one, but this one will be better, I promise. And have a great and productive rest of the week. And those of you who are in the American hemisphere, have a great day. Cheers.